Zhuozhou flood victims ask for government compensation. Maggots will grow soon. Biggest corruption under CCPs rule, not money and beautiful women, so what? Beijing wakes up to private investment, but can they make any difference? China's stockpiling crude oil, gold amid sluggish post-pandemic economy. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Zhuozhou flood victims ask for government compensation. Maggots will grow soon. The villagers in Zhuozhou City, Hebei province of China, have been recently allowed to return to their home after floodwater receded. Faced with a messy homeland, the flood victims began to count the losses, hoping for compensation from the government. According to Hong Kong-based Mingpao news outlet, Ms. Zhang, a villager in Zhuozhou town, is a victim of the disaster after the Chinese authorities diverted floodwater from Beijing to the populated areas in neighboring Hebei province to help save the capital, unleashing waves of anger. There are 4 members in Zhang's family, and her 2 daughters are studying in Beijing. Because her home is close to a dam at the entrance of the village, it was severely impacted by the flood. Ms. Zhang said that her house was built when she got married 20 years ago. After this flood, her family couldn't live in that house and has to build it again. Zhang, a tofu merchant, lost her fortune and had no choice but to let the soybeans get moldy. In Zhang's house, a stench is spreading. Ms. Zhang said that she sells her own tofu in a nearby town and earns 200 yuan a day. During this flood, the 1.5 tons of soybeans she stockpiled to make tofu in her room were all soaked by the floodwater. Flies are everywhere in her house, and there is nowhere to set foot. When a Mingpao reporter interviewed her, she was sitting in a pile of stinky soybeans, picking out the beans that hadn't gone moldy yet. Not only did soybeans suffer, but all kinds of tools used to make tofu were soaked in water, rusted and unusable. But Ms. Zhang can't clear these damaged items. She explained that she is waiting for the government to come to assess the damage and make compensation before restocking beans to make tofu. The amount of compensation after the disaster is unknown. Many other villagers have also found their homes devastated and their entire districts and farmlands submerged in floodwater. They are worried that the disaster-affected goods will not be compensated. On August 13, a video provided by a villager to the Mingpao reporter showed that the village was holding a meeting to discuss the matter of damage assessment, but the villagers and the government officials did not reach an agreement. After the villagers filled out the damage form, they still could not go home to clean up the flood-soaked houses. The villagers said angrily, "If you don't let us clean it up, there will be maggots in 2 months." The house collapsed and no one took care of it, and the street was full of garbage and no one cleared it. When will it be finished? The longer we wait, the greater the losses. Some villagers stopped the government officials at the scene and asked them to call their superiors to go directly to the scene to discuss with the villagers. The government officials who were surrounded by the villagers at the village committee told the villagers that someone would come to assess the damage within a week. Zhuozhou City is the hardest hit area in the recent flood in North China. In the case of Ms. Zhang, she estimated that it will cost at least 300,000 yuan to rebuild her damaged house. She said, "Now I have lost my source of income and all the peanuts and corn grown in the field have died." Many villagers in Zhuozhou town are engaged in animal husbandry, and their pig sheds are in a mess after the flood. Mr. Liu, a villager, told the Mingpao reporter that nearly 100 pigs in his family died or were washed away. His yard was full of dead pigs. Another farmer revealed that only a dozen of his 200 pigs survived, and the loss has reached more than 1 million yuan. The flood victims have been asking the authorities to quickly fix the damage so that they can return to normal life. Mr. Liu, who is engaged in the production of steel, said, "The damage has not been determined. Our house has not been cleaned up and we cannot live in it. This is the most urgent thing." Another villager sent a message to the government, "It's okay if you don't pay 100% of the price, but this matter needs to be settled, so we can quickly dispose of the damaged things." biggest corruption under CCP's rule, not money and beautiful women, so what? A blogger at Back China Network has pointed out that the biggest corruptions among the Chinese officials under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party are not their engagement in money and beautiful women as generally believed by the Chinese people. The use of power by the government cadres to buy positions, seek interests, embezzle money, buy real estate, raise second or third wives, are their explicit corruptions. But the hidden corruption is the most harmful to the Chinese people and its civilization. The blogger called Chinese Man divided the corruption into 5 types according to the degree of harm. They are 1. First, corruption of the news. The CCP officials use rumors and falsified facts to deceive and brainwash 1.4 billion people, distort right and wrong things, and corrupt people's normal intelligence, common sense, and their ability to judge right and wrong viewpoints. They control all the media, only allow one voice of the CCP to exist in the society, cut off the international media, and repress all dissidents. In a society without freedom of press and thought, which cannot see the reality and historical truth, it will never have the ability to correct errors and innovate, it will never be a normal country, and there will never be a bright future for people and the country. 2. Second, judicial corruption. The CCP authorities break through the bottom line of the most basic fairness and justice of the whole society, and the most basic law and civilization that maintains the whole society. Wang lynching incident, or the Zhuozhou chained woman incident, and Tongshan beating incident indicate that there is an umbrella for underworld forces. This is the tip of the iceberg of judicial corruption in China. The collusion between the government officials and bandits has deteriorated the society, and the CCP regime has become a gangster. It is entering a vicious circle of death. 3. Third, corruption of education. The corrupt and evil ideology of the CCP has severely damaged and harmed numerous generations of Chinese people, creating countless old and young brain-dead pink idiots, which is harmful to China and bringing disaster to mankind. With the wrong views and the superficial and rough irrational way of thinking, the CCP-led mandatory indoctrination of education content has made people hate human beings and modern civilization. It has also created fake professors, fake knowledge, fake diplomas, fake school administration. 4. Fourth, moral corruption. A large number of officials are hostile in the officialdom. Hypocrisy and shameless flattery are making Chinese society lose the most basic human nature and morality, the conscience. The current Chinese society relies on the moral self-help, conscience self-help, knowledge self-help, common sense self-help, and civilized self-help of a small number of ordinary people to maintain the survival of vulnerable groups. 5. Fifth, language corruption. The communist regime has been using various words constantly created to cover up the historical truth, so that people cannot correctly interpret China's real society and history. It has also been blocking countless normal words to hinder the normal language communication of human beings, resulting in the emergence of various homonyms and strange words, and bringing the most serious disaster in history to the Chinese people. The abuse of language has brought confusion in the use of language and seriously affected people's normal mental health. Beijing wakes up to private investment, but can they make any difference? After a string of consecutive policy errors in the realm of economic strategy, China seems finally to have awakened to the fact that its economy needs more help. In an analysis titled "Beijing Wakes Up to the Need for Private Investment" penned in the Epoch Times, Milton Ezrati, chief economist at Vested, a New York-based communications firm, said that the Chinese authorities started their effort a few months ago when they finally lifted the zero-COVID policy. Reversing a misguided policy was, however, insufficient for the economy's needs. So more recently, China has begun efforts to restore confidence among private businesses so that they will invest, expand, and hire new workers. Beijing's plans will likely fail. They reek of Marxist central planning, command, and control. In other words, they repeat past mistakes by continuing to ignore market signals, which are, of course, the ultimate guide for any successful economic effort. If these new efforts have any positive effects, they will likely be short-lived and instead sow the seeds of future economic troubles. Private business in China lacks confidence for two reasons. One is the legacy of strict zero-COVID policy. For 3 years, these measures imposed a series of coercive lockdowns and quarantines that have undermined any sense among individuals and businesses that they can plan, save, invest, or even earn reliably. Little wonder then that the business managers and owners have held back on putting any money at risk in new ventures. At the same time, Xi Jinping and other Chinese leaders have for years now talked up the need for China to move away from the competitive economy it had once cultivated and return to Marxist principles. Part of this public conversation has devolved into official rhetoric berating private businesses as somehow hostile to society for following profit opportunities revealed by market signals instead of the Chinese Communist Party's agenda. The effects of this behavior on private businesses have hamstrung China's economy. Faced with a faltering economy, Xi and the CCP have changed their tune. In an implicit admission of the failure of past policies, they lifted the zero-COVID policy in January and have recently begun to downplay talk of Marxist principles while reversing anti-private business rhetoric. Now, Xi refers to private entrepreneurs as our own people. But the figures above show that private business has remained wary. Accordingly, Beijing has come out with a new plan to rebuild confidence among private business owners and managers. Its promise is dubious at best. The plan contains 17 measures to increase investment spending by private businesses. In it, the National Development and Reform Commission will identify key industries for increased investment. The Commission has already compiled a list of 2,900 investment projects to absorb some 3.2 trillion yuan, or nearly $448 billion, in new investments. The planners have made clear that all these projects were recommended by local authorities. It is hard to see how such a plan can restore business confidence. The entire program is directed by central planners from the top down, but ignores market signals entirely in favor of government-ordained and government-selected efforts. The scheme will not only fail to inspire private investment or rebuild economic momentum, but it also carries all the classic risks of central planning. It will marshal tremendous resources and financing for efforts that government officials want, but that have little or no relation to what consumers or other businesses want and is signaled in the marketplace. Money and effort will go into activities that effectively have little promise of adequate returns. This approach is why China today has empty high-rise apartment blocks in places where no one wants to live and a legacy of debts run up by that misguided development effort. Government pressure and a plentitude of financing might elicit an immediate positive response to the program. Ultimately, however, it is hard to see businesses following too far along projects that have little relation to market signals and that consequently have, at best, a random chance of raising profits. China stockpiling crude oil, gold amid sluggish post-pandemic economy. China's post-pandemic economic recovery has fallen short of economists' expectations so far this year, with various metrics pointing to a stalling landscape. Despite disappointing data, the country has been stockpiling crude oil and gold as if it were experiencing accelerated growth. Last week, the People's Bank of China, PBOC, announced that it increased the country's gold reserves for the 9th consecutive month in July. The central bank added 23 tons last month, lifting total stockpile volumes to 2,137 tons. Gold imports to China totaled 792 tons in the first half of 2023, up 98% year-over-year. However, gold imports slowed on a month-over-month basis in June, tumbling by 29% to 98 tons. China has been on a gold buying binge since November, adding 103 tons to its reserves in the first half of the year. The World Gold Council, WGC, analysts say the purchasing trend will persist in the second half. The industry body also anticipates that other central banks, which have been some of the biggest gold buyers over the past 18 months, will continue to bolster their yellow metal inventories. According to the Council's 6th annual Central Bank Gold Reserve Survey, sentiment toward the precious metal remains positive. The organization stated that 70% of respondents believe that global gold reserves will rise over the next 12 months, a significant increase from last year's survey. As such, the Council remains optimistic on central banks' gold demand over the coming quarters, although it is unlikely to match the levels of demand seen in the second half of last year. ING analysts purport that the People Bank of China and other central banks have been scooping up gold as it is an attractive asset in times of instability. They expect central banks to remain buyers, not only due to geopolitical tensions but also due to the economic climate. Meanwhile, Beijing has complemented its gold buying binge with more robust mining output. In the first quarter of 2023, Chinese gold mining production rose 3% year-over-year. Overall, demand in China and other Asian countries is strong, with China and India accounting for about 50% of gold consumption. Bloomberg reported in October 2022 that immense volumes of gold had been withdrawn from New York and other Western financial centers and were shipped east to satisfy demand in Shanghai's gold market. There has also been speculation that China is buying gold in preparation for war. And Russia, following its invasion of Crimea in 2014, resulting in US-led sanctions, had been amassing huge volumes of gold and had initiated a de-dollarization campaign. With gold accounting for a large portion of Russia's war chest, the Kremlin has been able to mitigate the pain of being ousted from international financial markets. China might be preparing for this climate, especially after leader Xi Jinping told the People's Liberation Army to focus all its energy on fighting in the event of war. How about oil or natural gas? Despite a sluggish economy, second quarter GDP came in at a lower than expected 6.5%, and the manufacturing sector has been stuck in contraction territory for 4 consecutive months. China has been boosting its oil purchases. In July, China imported an average of 10.29 million barrels per day of oil, up 17% from the same time a year ago. According to S&P Global Commodity Insights, in the first half of 2023, total fuel oil imports spiked nearly 155% year-over-year. Domestic gasoline supplies tumbled about 3% from June to July, and diesel stockpiles rose about 2% during this span. China continues to import hefty volumes of crude from Russia. With Brent crude prices firming above $80 a barrel, Beijing could maintain its purchases of Russian Urals as they are trading at about $73 per barrel, which is above the price cap of $60 a barrel imposed by the G7 and the European Union. Although China has been a net oil importer since 1994, Beijing has been looking to bolster local production. The Institute for Energy Research estimates that domestic output accounts for 29% of the country's total crude consumption. The institute wrote, despite a slow return from COVID lockdowns and low overall demand, China is importing almost record levels of oil and upping its domestic oil production to near record levels, both due to ensuring energy security. Natural gas has also played an integral role in the country's energy security. China is poised to become the world's top liquefied natural gas (LNG) importer this year as companies plan to buy more energy. According to Rystad Energy, China has been building a dozen new import terminals, which could lead to LNG imports doubling from current levels to 138 million tons by 2033. Even with the vast purchases of energy and metals, market analysts anticipate that the Chinese economy could stagnate heading into 2024. Ipek Oskardeskia, an analyst at Swissquote Bank, said in a research note, shattered investor and consumer confidence, shrinking demographics, property crisis, and deflation hints that the Chinese economy could be on the path for a longer period of economic stagnation. We could therefore see a rapid pullback in investor optimism regarding stimulus measures and their effectiveness. Don't forget to comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.